Hundreds of millions of pounds worth of factory-fresh electric vehicles sit parked bumper to bumper across disused Royal Air Force runways and former commercial aerodromes in Oxfordshire, Leicestershire and Gloucestershire. Thousands of shiny, unblemished battery-powered hatchbacks, saloons and crossovers are left standing in open fields, exposed to the rain and frost, while executive boards at the world's largest automotive conglomerates issue unprecedented emergency warnings directly to prime ministers and cabinet ministers in Westminster. What was originally promoted as a smooth, legislated transition towards zero-emission motoring by statutory decree has collapsed into a fierce, high-stakes confrontation between economic reality and political dogma. Major global carmakers, including Ford, Stellantis, Nissan and Toyota, are no longer maintaining a polite public facade or quietly lobbying behind closed doors. They are engaged in an open public revolt against the UK government's zero-emission vehicle mandate, explicitly warning Whitehall that enforcing rigid sales quotas will inevitably trigger immediate factory closures, thousands of industrial job losses, and a devastating price shock for everyday working-class motorists across Great Britain. If you still believe the official narrative that Britain's automotive electrification journey is merely experiencing a temporary minor friction point, you are missing the single most significant industrial crisis unfolding on British soil today. To understand why the British motor trade has reached this dangerous impasse, we must examine the punitive financial architecture constructed by the ZEV mandate itself. Under current UK statutory regulations, every car manufacturer selling new vehicles in Great Britain is legally required to ensure that a strictly defined, escalating percentage of their total annual registrations consists of zero-emission battery electric models. For every single petrol, diesel or traditional hybrid car sold above that government-allocated quota, the manufacturer faces an automatic, non-negotiable penalty of £15,000 per vehicle. When lawmakers drafted these ambitious targets, their economic models depended on the convenient assumption that British consumer demand for electric cars would grow exponentially year after year. Instead, private retail buyers across the country have turned their backs on brand new battery electric vehicles in numbers that have shocked industry analysts. Private retail registrations for electric cars have stalled dramatically, leaving dealership forecourts, holding depots and distribution hubs overflowing with unsold electric stock that cannot be moved at current retail prices. By examining the detailed, audited registration datasets published monthly by the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the fundamental structural failure of this policy becomes painfully obvious. Understanding these behind-the-scenes mechanics is essential because it directly dictates the price you pay for every new or used car, the value of your trade-in, and the future availability of personal transportation across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. As we dive deeper into the secret commercial loopholes and credit trading schemes that global car makers are currently using to survive these multi-billion-pound compliance fines, take a brief moment to press the subscribe button right now. Subscribing to this channel ensures you stay ahead of the critical financial shifts, regulatory traps, and automotive market realities affecting your family's budget long before they are reported in mainstream news broadcasts. The operational strain on British motor dealerships has escalated into an outright crisis of solvency. Independent franchise holders and regional dealer networks across Great Britain are staging a quiet but firm inventory revolt. Multiple dealer groups are openly refusing to accept additional electric vehicle shipments from manufacturer factories because the carrying costs of holding that inventory are destroying their bottom lines. In the automotive retail sector, vehicles sitting on a showroom lot are financed through floor plan credit facilities, short-term loans, where dealerships pay rising interest rates on every unsold car for every day it remains on their property. When an electric vehicle sits unsold for 6, 9 or 12 months, those floor plan interest charges completely wipe out any potential profit margin. Compounding this disaster is the historic collapse in used electric vehicle residual values. A family EV that retailed at £45,000 brand new can easily suffer a 50% drop in market value within 24 months of its first registration. For a dealership taking a used electric car in part exchange, holding that vehicle on the lot for more than 60 days carries immense financial risk, as market prices continue to fall faster than the cars can be retailed. Consequently, many franchise managers are either offering insulting trade-in allowances or refusing to take electric trade-ins altogether, leaving existing EV owners stranded with assets that are depreciating faster than any modern consumer vehicle in history. Faced with catastrophic statutory fines on one hand and a retail consumer boycott on the other, car manufacturers have begun resorting to an aggressive commercial tactic that is actively distorting the entire UK car market. To satisfy the mandatory percentage ratios dictated by the UK government, several major manufacturers have started artificially restricting the delivery of popular petrol, diesel, and full hybrid models to British showrooms. Because the ZEV mandate measures compliance as a percentage of total sales rather than absolute volume, a manufacturer can instantly raise its electric vehicle percentage simply by selling far fewer traditional internal combustion engine cars. By intentionally withholding affordable petrol cars from British buyers, car makers are artificially manipulating their sales ratios to avoid paying the government £15,000 per car. The immediate real-world consequence for British households is a manufactured scarcity of affordable petrol hatchbacks and family crossovers. Working families seeking to purchase a straightforward, accessible petrol car are met with artificially inflated retail prices, lengthy delivery delays, and stripped-back trim options. This manufactured supply squeeze is forcing desperate buyers into the second-hand market, driving used petrol car prices to historic highs, and making basic personal mobility increasingly unaffordable for millions of households. Adding further insult to traditional British automotive manufacturing is the controversial credit trading mechanism embedded within the UK regulations. Under the mandate's pooling rules, car makers that fail to meet their electric sales quotas are permitted to buy compliance credits from pure EV manufacturers that only sell zero-emission vehicles. In practice, this means legacy brands that employ thousands of British workers and operate historic UK manufacturing plants are being forced to transfer hundreds of millions of pounds directly to rival, foreign pure EV companies simply to buy permission to keep selling traditional cars to the British public. Companies like Tesla and foreign electric brands receive massive financial windfalls funded directly by legacy car makers, effectively subsidising foreign competitors at the expense of UK manufacturing jobs and local industrial investment. Industry leaders have pointed out the bitter irony of a British regulatory system that punishes domestic vehicle manufacturing while funneling capital directly into overseas corporate accounts. The reluctance of British retail buyers to embrace new electric vehicles is not merely a cultural preference. It is rooted in cold, inescapable household economics. While government ministers continue to promote electric cars based on low residential electricity tariffs, the practical reality for roughly 40% of British households who live in terraced houses, townhouses, or apartment blocks with no off-street parking is vastly different. Drivers who rely entirely on the public charging network are subjected to commercial rapid charging rates that frequently range between 75 and 85 pence per kilowatt-hour. At these commercial rates, the cost per mile of driving an electric vehicle matches or even exceeds the fuel cost of an efficient modern diesel or petrol engine, completely eliminating the promised operational savings. Furthermore, the UK motor insurance market has inflicted a secondary shock on electric vehicle owners. Insurers across Great Britain have implemented dramatic premium increases for battery electric models, citing astronomical battery repair costs, long delays in obtaining replacement parts, and a severe shortage of certified high-voltage repair technicians. In many urban centres, insurance underwriters are quoting multi-thousand-pound annual premiums for modest electric hatchbacks, while some insurers refuse to issue policies for certain high-value electric models altogether. Behind the closed doors of Westminster, high-level crisis meetings between automotive executives and cabinet ministers have degenerated into open political warfare. Corporate leaders from Stellantis, the multinational manufacturing giant that owns Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën and Fiat, have repeatedly warned the Prime Minister that maintaining rigid ZEV quotas without substantial consumer incentives or structural policy adjustments will force them to permanently shut down historic British production facilities. The historic Luton assembly plant, which has manufactured commercial vehicles for over a century, and the converted Ellesmere port plant in Cheshire find themselves on the brink of closure. Stellantis executives have made it clear that operating under punitive UK sales fines while paying some of the highest industrial energy tariffs in Europe is commercially unsustainable. Simultaneously, executives at Ford, which invested heavily in converting its Halewood facility on Merseyside to produce electric drive units, have openly signalled that enforcing arbitrary sales quotas during a retail demand slump threatens the long-term viability of UK automotive investment. Nissan, whose massive Sunderland plant stands as the crown jewel of British manufacturing productivity, has likewise warned that supply chain frictions and unworkable consumer mandates put thousands of highly skilled engineering jobs at immediate risk. The structural collapse of used electric vehicle values has also sent shockwaves through the UK's multi-billion-pound car finance industry. For more than 2 decades, the vast majority of new car sales in Great Britain were funded through personal contract purchase agreements. PCP contracts allowed consumers to pay manageable monthly fees based on a guaranteed future value assigned to the vehicle at the end of the term. Finance houses set those guaranteed future values based on historical depreciation curves. However, because electric vehicles have depreciated far faster than any statistical model predicted, finance companies are facing immense losses when thousands of leased electric cars are returned at the end of 3-year terms. The returned vehicles are worth vastly less than the residual guarantees written into the original contracts. To protect themselves from further catastrophic write-downs, finance companies are raising interest rates and drastically lowering future value estimates on new electric agreements. As a result, the monthly PCP payment required to finance a new electric car has skyrocketed, pricing average British buyers out of the market entirely. The fundamental realization emerging from this industrial deadlock is that top-down government mandates and statutory penalties cannot forcibly override consumer economics or household budgets. The UK government attempted to legislate a technological revolution from a committee room, expecting British families to absorb higher vehicle purchase prices, surging insurance costs, unreliable public infrastructure, and brutal depreciation. What lawmakers fail to understand is that personal mobility is an essential economic necessity, not a luxury lifestyle choice that can be manipulated through corporate fines. By attempting to force consumer adoption through corporate coercion, the regulatory framework has succeeded only in destabilizing domestic manufacturing, destroying residual values, and creating an artificial shortage of affordable petrol vehicles. The quiet backdown currently being negotiated in Westminster is not a triumph of corporate lobbying. It is the inevitable capitulation of political ideology when confronted with the unyielding reality of consumer refusal. As Westminster quietly prepares emergency amendments to save British car manufacturing from self-inflicted collapse, a parallel market boom is occurring in the second-hand trade for simple, reliable, analogue petrol cars. British drivers are increasingly turning toward pre-mandate vehicles that offer accessible maintenance, affordable insurance ratings, and genuine immunity against these regulatory shocks. To discover the exact list of reliable used petrol cars that are rapidly becoming the ultimate financial safe havens for British motorists in 2026, click directly on the video appearing on your screen right now.